This is the voice of freedom. We are not one voice. We are many. We are your voice. But we can only be effective if you use your voice. Your voice. This is the voice of freedom. We will not hide from the truth. We will ask the hard questions until we are sure we have the truth. Welcome to the voice of freedom, where your voice will never be silenced. Welcome to the show, folks. Hope you're having a nice evening. It's pretty chilly where I am, but at least I'm in the northern part of Australia, and that's relatively warmer than many other parts of Australia at the moment. It's been a bloody cold week as we get around. So thank you for joining us. It's our regular Tuesday night, as it will be from now on. Catch up with Australia One. I want to say head, that's probably better than leader of Australia One, Riccardo Bosi, who is joining us tonight for a bit of a chat. If you have questions for him, please post them up in the online chat, and we will be able to get to them shortly. I'll bring Riccardo in. Riccardo, thanks for joining us. I've heard both you and Rhiannon have been a bit crook in the last couple of weeks. I hope you're feeling a bit better.
It's mainly Rhiannon. She's had a really rough trot. You know what it's like when you're under the pump. You work, and the moment the pressure comes off even slightly, as it does after the election, it's hit it pretty rough. So we took a quiet last week, just giving her a chance to sort of recover as best she can. But she's a trooper, tough as old boots.
Well, I've got to say, so are a lot of the people who are out supporting the whole movement in Canberra at the moment. There's been a few cries in the last few weeks that, Riccardo has deserted us in Canberra. Now, the originals have been there, 19 or 20 weeks now. They're staunch people. I mean, they're camping out in what must be minus 2, 3, 4 degrees. It's not a pleasant place. I don't think that they're not giving up in any way, shape or form. They're crying a bit that they haven't seen you. Do you think that they've missed the point about leadership not being the key here?
Oh no, look, I understand their perspective, but yeah, it's let's say it's the 6th of June yesterday, the D-Day, the anniversary of the landing at D-Day, and as I said, this election was the attempt to get a toehold on Normandy. Now we failed to do that, and that's okay because that's the nature of war. That'll happen, but this war is being fought on so many fronts, and for 3 months, over 3 months. And we had a plan for the months of February, March, April, and it didn't include standing on a hill in Canberra. But that what was required at the time. It got everybody awake. It woke up a lot of people. But right now, there are many other aspects of this war that I've got to focus my attention on. Now, the people in Canberra, 10 out of 10, well done. And I mean that quite sincerely. And they can hold ground in Canberra and let people know what's going on. But there are so many other aspects to this war, and it's exactly what it is. It's a war. It's not a battle. You might have a battle on one particular flank or a battle on another flank. But right now, we've got an entire organisation that we've had an election to fight and now do the post-election administration on, which includes continuing the fight against the Australian electoral corruption. That's Tom Rogers' little bung outfit out there. To keep the pressure on that, you just don't have the election and walk away. You attack and you hold, and you make sure you hold their feet to the fire. So that's going on from the 10 different candidates that we ran. They're all doing their bit to keep the pressure on. We're getting the news out internationally about the corrupted election, and we're naming names. We're going to make Tom Rogers famous, as well as the alleged voices of free speech like Credlin, Bolt, Jones, and Murray. Made them famous internationally too recently on an interview in the United States. And so this war has many, many levels and many aspects to it, and that's what we've got to do. I've got to spend my time around a lot of different things. On top of that, A1, and you got to understand, our job is to be a political organization. The freedom movement is the freedom movement. We were happy to join the freedom movement, but we're fighting our war a particular way. And that's what I've said from the very get-go. You fight on your flank, we'll fight on our flank, and whoever gets to the top, we can shake hands and then make sure the good triumphs. That's why we don't align with anybody extremely closely. We're there, we're part of it. But the freedom movement should keep doing what the freedom movement is intended to do. But we're a political organization. We have an organization to build, and I don't know how many of these people ever started a company or anything at all. a scout troop, who knows? But there's a lot of hard mechanics behind the scenes to get this organisation A1 up and running. Because remember, our job is to save Australia. That's it. And the means by which we do it, at the risk of repeating myself, you've got to understand this, the method is to create a moral political party that empowers individual Australians to reach their highest potential so that collectively all can participate in the reformation of Australia. Our job is to build the capability, the capacity of the Australian people. Now, sitting on a hill in Parliament, on Parliament Hill, rather, for 3 months was part of that awakening process, but there's a hard daily grind for our people to get out there and do their information nights, explain to people who we are, what we stand for, what the situation in Australia is. And this requires countless people. We've got our state coordinators, and then we've got our branch coordinators under that, and the branch coordinators are out there every week holding these information sessions, slowly building up this grassroots movement. And this takes a lot of effort to do. And then on top of that, we've got finances, we've got IT, we've got, you name it, every possible intelligence, training, plans. All these things have to happen every day. And so we're busy doing our war. 10 out of 10 to the Canberra, the staunch Canberra freedom fighters out there. Hold your ground. I told you it's going to be a very cold winter. But the good thing was we were there for 3 months. Now, just before I go, I'll let you jump in a second. You remember way back when we first did this, all the alleged, all those bogus YouTube loudmouths that said, come back at the end of March. Go away, come back at the end of March. Can you imagine what would have happened? And there's only 2 people saying don't do that. It was myself and Dave Graham. We stay put. And we did. And it's a good thing too, because they wanted us to disappear until it got cold. And you can see what it's like now. How many people are going to turn up in the middle of winter? Look, old military adage, don't invade Russia in winter. Don't try to get 1 million people in Canberra in winter. It's never going to happen. It's just the human dimension of this war. This human dimension of this war is very real. So it's a very long answer, but ladies and gentlemen, we've got a lot to do. Fight your war, we'll fight our war. And as I've said many, many times, we need as many individuals fighting, groups fighting from as many different directions as possible. Do not give our adversaries a moment's respite, not one.
What can people do who obviously can't travel to Canberra? So they want to be on the front line fighting. How can they help from home at the moment? Where is the front line now? Is it still complaining at the election and complaining to the authorities about our recent election?
It's everywhere. Look, the objective is to win the people. Now, we got a population of 25 million, of which about 15 million, 14 million are adults. Win the people. Now, how do you do that? Well, in the military, this is called directive control. Figure it out for yourself. For example, we're doing it on the political lines with our information sessions, getting out there under the brand A1. But other people just want to educate, and that's fine too. Get out there and educate. Now, understand this. Don't fall for the trap that big numbers in social media will translate into action. It doesn't. Never will. Never will. I was getting 500,000 hits. In the leading up to the Eden Monaro by-election. I thought, well, that's nice, but that'll translate into something. No, it doesn't. Boots on the ground, folks. This is a face-to-face conflict. You've got to persuade people bit by bit by bit. So the objective is win the people. How do you do that? You educate the people with data, with facts, with evidence. Because as we know, there's the demographics are broken up into many segments. The orange hat, the red hats the red hats are the bad guys that implement the black hat strategies. They'll only move when they see the black hats arrested. Not our concern. There are other people that might be taking care of that. Next, following the rainbow, the rainbow chart, the orange hats. And the orange hats, they're the true believers. They watch the ABC. If it's on the 7:30 report, must be true. And these people will change only in the face of evidence, but that evidence must come from trusted sources. So become a trusted source, like Maria Z, like you. You're sharp, you're on the ball, you provide evidence for what you're saying. So provide evidence to these people, and it's a slow process. Then you got the yellow hats, don't care. As long as their little world, they're safe in their little world, they will never change, except when they fear what's coming up behind them is greater than the fear of what's in front of them. And there's evidence for that too. For example, it's now coming out in mainstream media that if you got the jab, you likely got AIDS too. And they're going to go through, and this is very real, folks. Understand this, the 5 stages of grief. The first is anger. They're going to be angry at you. They won't be angry at the people that did it to it because they won't believe that. They're going to be angry. Very, very angry. Sorry, the first one's denial. Sorry, denial's first. They're going to be denying it first. Lies, lies, lies. Then anger. Then bargaining. then depression, then acceptance. So that's what you've got to go through. This human dimension of this war. We must win the people. 2 reasons. We've got to win the war with the people, but then we've got to be smart enough to win the people so we win the peace. Because what comes after this, and this is what we're spending a lot of time, as one's concerned, a lot of time in preparing for this winning the peace. Because the war is moving nicely. It's not as fast as I or you would like. I get that. And there are some bad times ahead of us. This is war. This is not, Call of Duty, where you die and respawn in 15 seconds. This is real.
Yeah.
This is real. And so it's slow, but win the people, win the people, win the people, however you think you can do it.
I've heard you speak many times about winning the people, and eventually we're going to get the sway of numbers behind us. A lot of people are concerned about who's going to back us up when that time comes. What are your expectations of either the current local law enforcement, let's put it that way, or federal law enforcement, or will it take military intervention?
Sorry, you broke up just before you finished that sentence. The question, can you re-ask the question?
Do you think that we'll be able to get police, local law enforcement, state, federal police involved to help clean us or give us the enforcement power once we've got the sway of numbers behind us, or will it be military that we require?
They're all on the wrong side. The leadership, the soldier, most of the soldiery are quite okay. I mean, I get complaints from people all the time saying, I've betrayed the military. I've done this. I've done that. It's time for them to grow up, as I think I said last week. But the actual soldiery and the officers below a certain rank are pretty straightforward. It's in the military, let's say, the 1 stars and above. Forget it. Most of the cops, they're part of the Masonic filth, except for the junior guys. Now, how does this work in real life? Okay. Can we trust them? Absolutely not. This is like denazifying Germany. Now, after the war, when the Allies were in command and they divided Germany into its 4 constituent parts under the control of each one of the Allies, they had to denazify Germany, but they still had to have the trains running. They still had to have the streets safe. They still had to fill in the blank. And so it was very hard to find people who had that skill set and yet who weren't Nazis. Does that make sense? So the best way to do it, and when we do, we'll get political control. The best way to do that is just make them an offer they can't refuse. You clear out the top echelon, which is pretty standard practice for any takeover, and you put the fear of God into the remainder and say, do your job or you're going to get the same result as the people we've just removed. So there'll be a very tense, very careful time. There's a line in my book, and I've got to tell you, if people want to know about me, buy the bloody book. It's at Wilkinson Publishing. Right. That'll save a lot of people, is this guy the real deal? Read the book, guys. And guess what? I wrote it myself, unlike most politicians who haven't mastered joined up writing. But there's a line in the book, and it says the highest form of leadership is to lead with the informed consent of the people you would deem to follow. But when you're dealing with animals, it's good to be feared. This is the real world. So all you gentle snowflakes out there that think that rounded vowels and Churchillian speeches are going to win wars, they're not. You put a gun to their head, metaphorically, and say, make the deal, do your job, and we might cut you a deal later. And this is the reality. But clear the top ranks, put the fear of God into the remainder, and do the best to transition from where we are to where we go. Because it's only going to be for a few months, let's say. Let's say we finally get an honest government. That'll be a shock to the senses, won't it? But let's say we get some sort of honest government in there, and their primary job, as I've said before, is just to clean up, get rid of all the COVID nonsense, open up the economy, let people get back to work as fast as we can, and clean up the electoral system. So no major policy changes, just get us from where we are to a point where the people can elect their genuine government. And then the policies will come in, and things like the right to self-protection, which is one of our policies, and I think it's a bloody good one. The right to self-protection. The old story of, when seconds count, the police are only minutes away. Well, guess what? And I'm writing a piece at the moment, and this is taking up a lot of my time. These are the 10-part series called The Law of War. And it's been held up for many months now, unfortunately. But it's a breakdown of what our philosophy is according to each area, that our end state is, and then the underlying principles, and then the actual policy implications. And one of them is self-protection policy. So if someone shoves a gun in my face, I've got the right to pull out my gun and blow his head off. Now, what's that going to do? to an honest person. Let me tell you this, because I had the coppers visit me on trumped up excuses, and they were quite aggressive and rude. And they warned me that, the next ones might not be as polite as us. I just smiled. But I can tell you, if I've got my 357 Magnum sitting on my hip and I get a knock on the door from the coppers, they're going to be a whole lot more polite to me, because if I'm innocent, they have no right to interfere with my life. Now, how does that sound? That sounds pretty good. So once again, we're just going to get from where we are to where we've got to get to. And then the world will change very, very quickly. So this transition period where we've got to get rid of the bad guys, it's only sufficient to clean up the system so we can elect our own people. And after that, the laws come in. And it was alleged, it was the New South Wales Police Commissioner, Mick Fuller, allegedly said, it's a good thing when the people fear the police. Really, Michael? Really? This is the man that was replaced, the man that got a $200,000 pay rise during COVID. Now, I wonder what he got the pay rise for, but he was replaced and removed. So I don't know where that mongrel is currently chained up, but we'll dig him out. But Michael, it's a good thing when the coppers fear the innocent people. And that's a different perspective that every copper in this miserable fucking country is going to learn. The people are sovereign. The public servant's going to learn that, because when they lie to the people by putting in false data, false reports, that's sedition, because you can't lie to the sovereign, and the people are sovereign. Are you starting to get the drift of how this country is going to change very dramatically after 3 short months where we tidy up the organisation, get the COVID restrictions gone, and a government that is elected, to quote the Americans, by the people, for the people, and of the people, not of the special interest groups, not of the elites. So it's a good question, but it's not like it's impossible. It'll be tough, not impossible, but the relief at the end of it, once we've denazified or de-Masonified Australia's leadership, which will be a joyous day for everybody, the people will be so powerful economically, personally, in every sense of the word, that we're going to be fine.
Rick, you've spoken at length in Canberra and other places about the Masonic backgrounding that's in much of what we're going on here. Now, I know from my place to the nearest Masonic lodge is maybe 5 or 6 kilometres. You never take much notice of them until you're really looking, but they're in a lot of different places, aren't they? Now, for such a secret institute, they're even in small towns. Why is it, do you think, that people don't know who's a Mason, who's not? And if we wanted to get any clarification, why aren't we watching those places? You know, they hold regular meetings. Like, pretty easy to see who walks in and out of a building.
Secret societies, mate. What was it, John F. Kennedy? We loathe secrecy. You bet. You bet. No, the Masons, there's a long history there. And one of the Masons rang up and he wanted to make the false analogy between the Catholic Church and the Masons. You know, there's some bad people, but not the whole thing's not corrupt. Nice try, mate. Look, the Catholic Church needs a rocket as well. That needs to be torn apart and ripped asunder, because it is a loathsome organisation at the top level. That's not to say that the good nuns and priests are bad. I get that. But I'm sorry, it's like saying you're a good Nazi, you're a good Mason. Forget it. Not going to happen. Not going to happen.
Yeah.
And so these secret societies at the bottom level, they're just, gentlemen's clubs to advance your business. It's for people who can't make it on merit and they have to get in through favors. But it's the middle and the top levels. The middle level is where the pedophilia resides, and you've got the satanic ritual abuse on top. And they just sit quietly in the shadows, and they've been controlling us for generations. And so watching the local lodge doesn't really matter much. And you've got to, for goodness sake, you're adults. And there's nonsense rituals that you go through, apparently. And you go online, you can find out all about them. Now, go back, 50, 60 years. If you weren't in a lodge of some sort, you weren't making it anywhere. Knights of the Southern Cross, I'm advised, had to take off because the Masons were taking over so much. So the Catholics had to get their own going. Okay, that was then. This is now. These secret societies will be revealed and destroyed, and they're actually already starting. I can't give you my sources, but they're already starting to take each other out because people are starting to squeal. Because this Mason that gave me the false, conflated, a religion with Masons. I can't remember, or maybe I can, but certainly the Christians don't threaten to kill you if you threaten to leave, unlike the Masons, unlike Islam, unlike a bunch of other, un-Australian ideologies. I'm no longer interested in being part of your organization. Well, we're going to kill you if you leave. Really? Now, It's fascinating. When I started this journey way back when, I was approached by a number of Masons who had found out the truth, and all the best they could do, this is their explanation, was they ceased to become active members. And I got books and papers to read and all sorts of assistance to understand the nature of the threat, because I certainly didn't understand the threat that the Masons um, posed to Australia 15 years ago when I started this little journey accidentally. But over the years, you do your research, you find out, and these people will be exposed. They will be removed. Every Masonic lodge will be torn down. No compensation, because when their guilt in what has been going on is discovered, whatever assets the Masonic filth own will be taken up by the Australians and thrown into consolidated revenue. That includes big buildings in the centre of the CBD of Sydney. So your Masonic filth, you're on notice. You better run and hide now. Oh, sorry, you can't quite get away now, can you? Because your routes of escape have been blocked and you're stuck, and your masters aren't giving you orders anymore because they've been arrested. But that's okay. We're patient. We'll come and get you. We'll come and get your assets. And all you goat bothering, apron wearing Masonic filth will either be in jail or under control.
I'll go to some of the questions that have been, actually, before I go to some of the questions that have been put into the chat, Riccardo, I want to get your thoughts on the rumor that it's starting to get around the country that the Queen, or at least the person purporting to be the Queen, has invested another Governor General here in Australia, somebody who is, if you like, the real Governor General. The only problem is she didn't leave directions as to how we, the people, find this person. Have you any idea what's going on there?
Oh, I've heard some great stories. I've heard the Queen died 2 years ago.
Oh, so I've heard that too. I've heard she's expected to die. She's going to wait until Harry and Meghan get back to America before she dies, just to be the most inconvenient, I'm sure.
Oh, look, there are so many stories like that. The real king of Australia is some guy, and then you've got Aboriginal tribes saying that sword of King Charles was given to them by Queen Elizabeth, so they have sovereignty. Look, there's a million stories out there. I'm not making fun of them. I'm just aware of them. But
No.
once again, as I've said from the beginning, unless I have hard evidence in front of me, we make our plans. A1 makes its plans on what we know to be fact. So there's three concentric circles. There's what we know to be absolutely verifiable fact. There's stuff that's likely to be true, and there's stuff right on the periphery that might be true, but you don't base your plans on hearsay. There's the Galactic Federation that's helping us apparently get through this particular challenge, and there's a million stories out there, and I've heard most of them. The Antarctic bases, I've heard that too. There's a lot of stories, but once again, in terms of say again.
I think I may have spoken to you about the Antarctic bases as well as others. In fact, that brings me to something that was somebody who was waiting in the room earlier tonight before even I got in here, was very keen. And the first question that was in the room, let me just get it back up so that I can remember, say it word for word. Do you really think Looking Glass is real? Now, be careful because we're on YouTube. That's all I'm going to say. But
look, I think a lot of things. I've heard a lot of things, but once again, we can only predicate our plans on what we know to be fact. There's a lot of compelling evidence. Look, I've had amazing experiences just in my life, quite apart from this political journey that we're on. I think I told you last time. Did I tell you about the UFOs that we were patrolling in northwest Western Australia? And did I tell you that story?
Yeah. Just everybody sort of watched it go across the sky, and everybody looked at each other and sort of said, "Right, well, that was good," and nobody said a word.
Okay, so most of us who have been around a few years have had experiences that are completely inexplicable. There's stuff that can be explained, but stuff you just go, I have no idea. That doesn't mean you base your life on it. It means you pay attention, you store it away, but you get on with it. But as the leader of a political organization like this, where we have a lot of people, and I'm just the lucky guy to be the face of it. We have the most amazing team of people, many of whom you have met, and they work tirelessly on a volunteer basis. And we have to move forward in a measured, intelligent, evidence-based organization, because if we are to presume to have the people trust us to move them from where they are to where they need to be, then we have to do that. So whether I've heard stories about this, that, and the other. The Queen died 2 years ago. We're waiting for London Bridge to fall. All these things that are out there, it may or may not be true, but it doesn't necessarily help right here, right now. Because right here, right now, we have to win the people, help them understand what's really been going on in the country, and then earn their trust. Earn their trust. So when the free and fair election comes along, they go, you know what, this Australia One mob, I think they've got enough of a grasp on what's going on to help us to get to where we are. And where we want to be is the Australian people
Yeah.
with their sovereignty in their hands, making decisions for themselves. In fact, I got asked, this is one of the last weekends in Canberra. I can't remember which one it was, but you meet a lot of people over the weeks and over the months, and they say a lot of things. And one
Um,
gentleman came up and said, "What are you going to do when you're the prime minister?" And I said, "Well, that's not my job. My job is to we're a soldier. I'm not a politician. My job's a soldier. Get in, fix it, and then back out so that people can take control." And he
yeah,
looked at me gobsmacked. He's generally wide-eyed and slack-jawed. And I said, "No, it's not my job to become the prime minister. That might happen, but that's not the point. The point is to fix it and give it to the people and back off and go back to the farm, inverted commas. Not that I've got one, but metaphorically to go home." And he
sure.
literally stood there for, I don't know, 15 seconds with his mouth open, not saying anything, because unlike everybody else, this is about, our Australia One's view is it's about the people. And I mean that in the most sincere way. Give you your power, give you your authority back, let you know it's always been yours. It can't be taken away from you. And I address that in one of these Law of War series pieces that I'm writing. But that's the whole point of this thing. This is about the people, getting the people to stand and say, "I am me. I am the one of the sovereigns of this nation. All political authority comes from me, and that starts at my front gate. And you can't come in unless you have cause." And
Mm.
once people get that, man, oh man, this country is going to be very different.
I can't wait for the ball to sort of swing into our side of the court, if you like. But people are getting very impatient, waiting for that to happen. Just some of the questions that we're seeing here now, and look, I've fielded a heap of them between our last chat last Tuesday and now, from people saying, why wasn't there somebody for us to vote for in our electorate? And I've made it quite clear that if there wasn't somebody in your electorate this time round, then stand up, be that person in your electorate next time round, because that's what's required. And now, of course, we're heading towards a Victorian election. People are screaming, "Oh, look, Australia One is still not a party." Now, Australians, for whatever reason, and I'm sure it's two-party preferred brainwashing, uh, don't seem to understand that the two-party or any party system is illegal under the already illegal constitution. Um, so, how are you going to drum this into people that A1 will either be a party, because you're going to have to go with the flow to make it easy for people to understand, in which case you'll get people probably standing in most electorates in most states, or are you going to go down the independent path again? Is that the plan for the state and next federal elections?
Oh, let me answer the first part of your question first. How are we going to drum this into people about A1? We've been at this for a long time now, and I dragged my family and my two long-suffering daughters in the back of an unair conditioned bongo van, 6,355 kilometres from Sydney up to northern New South Wales, up to Townsville and back, 29 days, 26, or was it 24? 24 meetings and presentations. So, and then on top of that, I did southern New South Wales and then Victoria as well for another 3 weeks. So we're
Yep.
getting out there, we're doing it. So I understand people's concern, but get off your ass. What have you done? My wife's in a wheelchair with multiple sclerosis. She works like a Trojan. My daughters are missed out on school. We homeschool as best we can, and we're filling in the blanks. But we are sacrificing everything. And when I say everything, I mean everything. And we're only
Mm.
here because of the goodwill and generosity of countless A1 supporters who give us pots of honey, beef jerky, the odd side slab of lamb roast occasionally. Some very generous people have thrown some money our way just to keep us fed. And I mean just to keep us fed. So we've committed
Yeah.
everything, folks. So if we're not moving fast enough for you, I'm sorry, we're doing the best we can. But understand this. You must stand up, look in the mirror. Why should we trust you, Bosi? Don't. Don't trust me. I keep saying it. Have a
Yeah.
look. Read the book. There you go. Look, read the book. I'll do it again. I'll make it real easy for you. Greatness awaits you. The 5 pillars of real leadership. Go to Wilkinson Publishing, buy the book, and for $30, you can decide for yourself whether A1 is the real deal or not. And if it is, go for it. And if it's not, well, good luck too. But here's the point. We're still here. Let me go back another step. All the brave freedom fighters that joined Cory Bernardi's Australian Conservatives, where are they now? Neatly sconced in their homes doing bugger all. And who's still here? Us, my wife and I, and a handful of people that started A1. So we haven't stopped. I've been at this for 15 years, folks. Started off doing a political cartoon. We're still here. Why? Because it's the biggest game in town. It's the only game in town. Now, to your point about parties, you're exactly right. People are brainwashed thinking you have to be a party. First of all, as you said, parties are unconstitutional. Now, the model that we have created, and we've tested it this last election, is this. We will be known as a political party, Australia1party.com. We will be a party when we finally get the IT and everything else sorted out. But that doesn't mean you'll see an A1 next to the name. I don't want you to vote for A1. I want you to vote for someone you know, like, and trust, like Darren Bergworth in Victoria. Now, Darren's a tradie. He's got a good reputation amongst the footy clubs down there. He's a smart guy. You know, tradies fix things, pollies don't. Vote for me. Now, they're the sort of people you've got to vote for. At that name recognition, someone you already know, like, and trust. Just not because if we put ourselves up as the brand, then you're voting for the brand. You should never vote for the brand. Please, otherwise we will end up, and all organisations over time degrade. You'll just end up like Liberal, Labor, Nationals and Greens. We don't want that. We want you to vote for someone you know, like, and trust. Because here's what we do. Just once again, we have a set of policies, because it's hard to think of a full range of policies across the entire spectrum of governmental responsibility. So we've got that. But it's consistent. It's internally coherent. You sign up, you like it, you commit to implementing those that philosophy, let's say. But then what we do, and we prepare you, and then we set you free. You are a genuine independent. Now, you can speak to any one of our candidates and find out how much control we placed on them. And the answer was just adhere to the policies, away you go. And that was fantastic because, as I said to you, how should I preference? That's entirely up to you. Go preference any way you want to, because you are a genuine independent, responsive to your people, not to the party. So we will be a party in a formal sense, but we will not have A1. And this is what we're going to do with the Electoral Act when we get in. No more party names. You have to get out there and earn that right. Now, for some know-nothing blow-in that wants to get his snout in the trough, there's no way they're going to recognise that name. But for someone who genuinely has a history of service to their community, that is already known, liked and trusted, like Darren Bergworth and a bunch of other people that are out there working just on a daily basis, serving the people in their community, they're the ones that will be recognised, and they're the ones you want in Parliament. Now,
so the question then arises: if you have a bunch of people just like that, each area they represent is going to require different things. Some will require new schools, some will require hospitals, roads, infrastructure. Some will require a greater financial investment than others, maybe, and some will require investment in different areas, be that infrastructure or tourism or whatever. How do you, as a government of independent people, how do you make decisions then based on what's best for your community, what the country can afford, and what's best for the country?
Oh, no, that's excellent. Well, what have we been doing so far? So before we look at what we're going to do, let's look at what's been done thus far. When Liberals in power, the Liberal seats get all the benefits and Labor gets nothing. When Labor's in power, the Labor seats get all the benefits. This is the pork barreling, right? We hear about, right? You know, this oval gets an extra stand in for whatever. So the utterly corrupted system we can't have.
Everybody gets a new school shed, shelter shed. That was, nonsense. I think, one of Gillard's great gift.
Look, there's going to be that member, if it was part of the Liberal, Labor, National, Greens machine, it goes in and says, I want this, and the party says, no, you can't have it because we've got to spend money over here. We've got to give $500 million to the Clinton Foundation, or we give $500 million to the Great Barrier Reef Foundation. So all of a sudden, instead of saying yes sir, no sir, 3 bags full, so may I have another, to the party leadership, the MP goes, oh, no, you don't, sunshine. This is what we need, and here's the evidence of what we need. So you've got a better chance as an independent in a parliament of independents who are bound together by an idea of what Australia should be. So it's not going to be, we're not going to be at loggerheads with each other. And not every seat's going to want Australia 1. Some of the inner city seats love killing babies. They love full-term abortion. Tanya Plibersek, or some electorates like the City of Melbourne under Adam Bandt, the leader of the Greens, love the fact that schools are teaching kids how to sex correctly because they're sickos, they're pedophiles. And they'll never have an A1 representative in there because they're sick and demented people. So good luck to them. Good luck to them. But the rest of them, the ones that are bound to this idea of what Australia should be, will do it. Now, on your point of, and they just get up there and say, we need this, we need another school, we need air conditioning, we need more than temporary sheds for our kids. Oh, that'd be a step forward, wouldn't it? With air conditioning in the hot summer months. That's a dawdle. That's an easy decision to make. Stop giving money to Hamas, $100 million a year to Hamas, a terrorist organization, and how about we look after the schools? Now, in terms of the money, as I've explained before, once we get our 2% expenditure tax in, we'll be $500 billion in the black, instead of being 250 billion in the red immediately. So all of a sudden, the people will realize, my God, there's more money here than we actually needed. How about that? We can actually get this and you don't have to wait 15 years. There's another element I've not touched on before, but let me mention it now. Right now, we have a massive bureaucracy in Canberra. And as I've said, Canberra's like ancient Rome. It actually never produced anything. It just consumed the resources from the empire, but it produced bugger all. So what we're going to do, as part of our plan, is each MP, instead of having 3 staff to manage an electorate of 100,000, which is obviously impossible. You cannot do it. You cannot manage an electorate of 100,000 with 3 staff. So we're going to break down the public service, and they're going to hate this. And I love it. They're going to hate it because if you're not in Canberra, you're out of Rome, you're in the provinces, and your career is over. Well, get used to it, sunshine. You collective bunch of bastards that didn't suffer one day in just this pandemic. Your job will now be supporting. You'll be the public service. You'll be serving the public in the electorates around the country. So the MP will have a larger staff to actually manage what's going on in that electorate. So they're not stuck there trying to figure out what the hell to do and being at the behest of a behemoth of a public service organization that'll crush them. The public service in Canberra will be reduced dramatically and shipped out to the provinces, and you will learn what it means to serve the people. You are public servants. You're not on a sinecure for life. You will have performance standards, and if you don't meet them, you'll be punted. And you can test yourself in the marketplace of business like the rest of us have managed to do. So the public servants, you watch every heavy public servant electorate vote hard against A1 because they're going to vote for their jobs, but they're going to lose. So you want to serve the public? No problem, but you'll be doing it out in the provinces. You actually will be working to an MP because each MP is going to get more staff to service their electorate and understand exactly what their needs are. And if the needs are heavily weighted to a new hospital, like Wagga, which is already, I think the Wagga-based hospital is supposed to cater to 45,000 people for the region, and it's already servicing something like 55. And that imbecile Gladys Berejiklian and the local moron down there wanted to build a new stadium rather than actually fix the hospital. And then they wanted to shove another 10,000 people down there, which would push it up to 65,000. So instead of having the machine doling out the money, you'll actually have the MP saying, hey, our hospital is at breaking point. We need more. We need better. And so all of a sudden, you've got an MP with more staff, and all of a sudden that MP actually has to deliver instead of just sit there every 3 years, get votes, and put their snout in the trough and vote in Parliament. It's going to be messy. It's going to be untidy. But I tell you, once this settles down into a system, and it'll settle down into a magnificent system, and it'll be rough. But welcome to the real world, because every single bloody Australian adult out there has to get involved. No more of this, oh, look, I couldn't be bothered. Well, if you couldn't be bothered, you've got no right to complain. So get involved, and you're going to have to get involved.
I was having the chat with Darren earlier this evening. Australians are an apathetic mob. We're relatively lazy, and until you take our license, our beer, or our boat away, we don't really sit up and take much notice. We described it as a bit like death from 1,000 paper cuts. They take a little, they take a little, they take a little, and over time they take it so slowly you don't really notice it. But all of a sudden you're locked in your house with a mask over your face and you're too afraid to pick up the phone to talk to family. How easy is it going to be to change the psyche of the people who have fallen to this?
No, it's near impossible, mate.
Yeah, when it comes to saturation with the jab, I think we've probably reached that now. Everybody who's going to be jabbed is already jabbed. Those who aren't are never going to be. So what is the next push point there? Are governments going to come after us? Is that what these detention centres have been built for, do you think?
Oh, well, it's getting back to your first point about the laziness of the Australian people. It's human nature and it's international. I'll give you two examples, and one I've used before and one only just recently. When Moses led the Israelites out of slavery from Egypt, the moment it got a bit tough in the desert, they said, let's go back to Egypt because at least we had food and shelter. So once again, the majority of people do not yearn for liberty. They don't yearn for freedom. They yearn for comfort. There's only this small, say 20, if you're lucky, 30% that'll actually fight for liberty. So that's a reality, and that goes back thousands of years to Israelites. Now, when you look at Alexander Solzhenitsyn's Gulag Archipelago, which he exposed the prison system in Soviet Russia, came out in the early 70s, 72, 73, I think, and he described what it was like. And he complains in the early stages of the book of how people didn't stand up and fight. They just forlornly and meekly allowed themselves to be arrested. And they were furious when they were in their camps in the gulags. And this is the millions and millions of Soviets died, Russian citizens died, millions. Bullet to the back of the head in the Lubyanka KGB prison of one of many places. And he complained, we burned in our prison camps when we should have said something. And look, you taught this early in the piece. If you ever get captured, your best chance of successful escape is in the first 24 hours, because the longer you're in captivity, the further from freedom you are. And they didn't know that. We know that professionally, but they didn't know that. Most people don't. And look, they complied. They wear their masks. They got their jab. They're going to die. So is this a typically Australian? It is very Australian, but you got to understand that we're allowed to be brought into this somnambulant perspective, this sleepwalking perspective, quite intentionally. The rest of the world has in the last 50 years has been at war of various sorts, and we've had this very comfortable life, and that put us to sleep. I think I told you once before, we're like the dodos. We couldn't spot a natural predator. Well, when the truth comes out over the next,
Yeah.
I guess, 6 months, and it's going to be pretty horrendous, going into maybe 6 to 9 months as it comes out. Yeah, 6 to 9 months. It'll be shocking, and then people will learn what occurred, and that'll wake them up. They'll get involved. They'll start to get involved because they're going to be angry. They'll be furious. They'll be desperate to stay
So
alive. This is where bargaining comes in.
do we think that movement is going to come from America first? Because some of the intel that I've been hearing out of America is that the true believers believe that there is going to be some breakthroughs in the current political structure in America very soon. In fact, there might be a number of arrests. There could be a ceremony, a very public ceremony. All of this might take place before July 4th or even potentially on it, I'm told, because wouldn't it be a great day to have a party in America's history? But it will definitely all happen before August. Have you heard anything like that?
Oh yeah, very similar stories. And look, I've said this before publicly, so I'll say it again. I know arrests have already started to some degree, very quietly. Um,
Yep.
but once again, and I've heard the stories about what might be coming out of the US. Now, if you read between the lines of the stories that are coming out, you remember last year I said, just get through to Christmas, get through to Christmas. And we got through to Christmas, and people said, well, why aren't we free? I said, well, that wasn't the point. The point was to pick a point to get to. But then straight after
That's
that,
right.
January, February, March, we started seeing news stories that we wouldn't have seen 6 months earlier or even 3 months earlier. Stories critical of the government's response, stories critical of the jabs. The truth started coming out. Now you've got to read between the lines. This is a large, complex operation to free the world. Extremely large, extremely complex. Resources are limited when you think of a global scale. You've got to, it's easy enough to do a cordon and search on a village. You put an outer cordon in to stop people getting into the village. You put an inner cordon in to stop people getting out of the village. And then you go house by house by house. You check the tunnels out. You find the cache of explosives and weapons and radios, for example. You line up all the bad guys. You try to figure out who the bad guy is, who the good guy is. You drag them off. Now, that's just a village. And it doesn't matter whether it's Vietnam or Afghanistan, same stuff. Now multiply
Yeah.
that by the
Yeah.
planet, put that on the planet. So for those of us, and I get impatient too. Look, don't get me wrong. I'm human. I want to see this fixed yesterday. I want to see some people on the gallows who deserve it. But this takes time. This
Mm.
takes time. And so, yeah, I've heard those stories too. If they happen, great. But once again, you don't predicate any plans on if. You don't plan on hope. Hope is not a system, as one American general
No,
famously wrote. Hope is not a plan.
no,
So
you just
A1,
don't know.
yeah, we predicate all our
Sorry.
actions on, we listen to all of this, and if it happens, we are poised to adapt very quickly. But the point is, we plan on the fact that we're going to have to do this by ourselves, and we'll get there. We'll get there. It'll take a bit longer, but we will get there. And the people will wake up. And when the people realize that when they stand up, there aren't enough police, there aren't enough jails, there aren't enough camps to stop us. And this is what Solzhenitsyn was saying in his book. If we had stood up then, this would have fallen apart because the police physically can't
Yeah,
arrest 100,000 people who are marching towards them. They will run. And
yeah,
when people do
yeah.
that and say, no, you don't, they lose, we win.
Well, speaking of they lose, we win, there was a meeting held in Davos in the last week or so, and we were expecting all sorts of horrible things to come out of that meeting, including a direction that would allow the World Health Organization to come through our borders with impunity and basically do whatever they like to Australian citizens in the name of keeping us healthy. I love that. They'll beat you to death keeping you healthy. Uh, but it didn't go all their way there. What's your take on what happened in Davos?
It's almost like somebody else was running the show, allowing them to
Yeah,
do what
yeah,
they always planned to do so that people could see it, but not allowing it to take effect, particularly that World Health Organization health directive, which would have been utterly destructive. But it was just, again, it's evidence. This was their plan, and their plans are easily identified on the internet. That's all there in front of you. 2021 Agenda 2030, whatever it's called. It's all there. It's all very clear. But their plan has been subverted. A strategy discerned is a strategy defeated, and it's almost like the white hats might be controlling the black hats, and the black hats don't know it. What they've actually, I think, they've spent their
yeah.
time doing is, yes, he's got to cut the head off the snake, but what they've actually done is the reverse. And we discussed this with Steve Rogers, the last interview of the US. You got to take out the implementers, take out the low-level implementers, and by low-level implementers, I mean like police commissioners and people like that, the ones that control the dogs, who then will chase you down. You start taking them out, and that's where the Masonic filth comes in. They're all being taken down, and the chain of command is now suspect. I've heard stories, and I can't validate it here, but I've heard stories of high-priced individuals in any number of places, whether it's the polity, the bureaucracy, the constabulary, the military, who have been dragged in and made the offer, and they're sobbing, but I didn't know, but I didn't know.
Oh, oh,
See you later, sunshine.
Yeah. Well, if you've been dragged in, yeah, it's a bit too late. I think you're not going to be able to backtrack too much on that. Um, uh, Getting a lot of questions here from people who are concerned about Dave Oneg's. Now, I'm not really aware with what's happened with Dave in the last little while, but apparently today or in the last few hours, he's imploded a bit or exploded a bit online. People are wondering about your thoughts on Dave, not necessarily the current situation. You may not be aware of it. I'm no more aware of it other than there seems to be a matter of some concern.
No, I don't
No?
worry about. I don't think about anybody else. The only people I think about are the A1 and the Australian people, and all these other people. As we've said many times, they're climbing the hill, fighting their war their way. If they can get followers, good luck to them. If they can't, but I don't worry my mind about any of those guys at all. Not one.
Stephen Cox wants to know, have you picked up any new information about voting fraud in the federal election?
No, no more than we've been talking about. It's patently obvious. My focus has been raising it internationally, which I did last week with this interview with Steve Rogers, Lieutenant Steve Rogers. You can probably find it online. You can find it on our Gab feed.
Yep.
So my point is to make Tom Rogers, the head of the Australian Electoral Corruption, world famous, because and you've got to do that, folks. Not because I'm nasty, and I am. I can be a real prick when I need to be, but for professional reasons only. But
Exactly.
You realize it's Saul Alinsky who wrote the rules for radicals. Use their own weapons against them. The 10 rules for radicals. Look it up. This is what they've been doing to us for years. And one of them is personalize the attack. Never attack the ABC. Never attack the AEC. Attack Ita Buttrose by name. Attack, not Sky News, but attack Peter Credlin, former chief of staff to a prime minister who apparently never knew any of this stuff. So she's either an imbecile or she's utterly corrupted. Take your pick. And her husband, former federal director of the Liberal Party. Personalize the attack. Make it real. Make them squirm. Let them know they cannot hide. That's why I hit, and I've been hitting, what's that name? Mr. Potato Head. Peter Dutton for 6 months, knowing that he was going to replace Scott Morrison. That was clear as day. So ask Peter Dutton, from whom did he buy a house for $2 million and subsequently sell it for a very short time later for $5 million? Now, I'm not suggesting anything illegal happened. Maybe Peter is just a very canny real estate investor, just like the strip mall in Townsville that he owns with no tenants or very few tenants, and yet he's still getting paid massive rent. Maybe he's just a very canny investor. I am not suggesting that Peter Dutton is corrupt, but something stinks. So, personalize the attack with
the sound of it.
Oh, with Townsville, absolutely. He's just a canny investor. You know what? I might follow Peter's lead and see what he buys. But listen, look at Saul Alinsky's rules for radicals. This is what they've been doing to us forever. Hold us to a standard that they don't hold themselves to, for example. There's all these things. Personalize the attack the AC, and that's why I'm doing it. So in terms of, answer to your question, what are we doing with the corruption? I've heard any new stuff? No, but it doesn't matter. My job is to get it international. My job is to raise the issue internationally so they know that the AEC is as corrupt as the US. And this now starts to give a pattern to the other countries. They look at the US and go, Biden was never elected. Bloody hell. Does that mean that Albanese probably wasn't elected? Does that mean? And we start to reveal nationally and internationally the pattern of behavior by our adversaries. And then people start to wake up and they go, okay, now I'm starting to see the big tectonic shifts in the international polity.
Yeah. Chris McGrath raises a point about the Governor General's residence and the people who've been protesting out the front. The Governor General's residence is set back off the road a fair bit. In fact, he's probably closer to the lake than he is the road. And I've often wondered myself why the protesters haven't had a PA system on a boat or something set up on the other side of the lake, blowing across directly into the drawing room, if you like, of the Governor General's residence. Can you enlighten us on the tactics and what may or may not be able to be used around the lake there?
Oh no, the gentleman running the protest at the Governor General's residence, and his name escapes me, so I do apologise, but he's done a very measured job. He was always respectful. He cooperated with the guards at the front. And they just wanted to make their presence felt, but they wanted to do it in a respectful manner. Now, it was never his intention to be a thorn in the Governor General's side, but just make sure that their presence was felt. So when they were removed and they were told to move, I think, to the top of a hill somewhere overlooking it, they complied because that was their approach. They didn't want to be in contravention of the law as it was. And so I'm not surprised they've continued to behave themselves in that manner. Can you make a pest of yourself on the lake? I dare say you probably could, but that's probably not what they wanted to do. Their approach the whole time was respectful and to stay within the bounds of the law.
Cold enough on the bloody ground. You don't need to be on the water in Canberra during winter, I would have thought. So that'd be my take on it.
They might have run into that AFP rib that had the energy weapon shooting at us as we crossed Commonwealth Bridge.
Yes. Christine would like to know, if we go into lockdown, how long do you think it's going to be for? Let's assume that might happen sometime after July and before September, maybe.
Yeah. I think that's the time bracket I'd look at. And look, in terms of planning, we're planning on 4 weeks, either side of 4 weeks. Might be shorter, might be longer. That's what we're planning, 4 to 6 weeks to be on the safe side. Food, water, fuel, gas bottles, things like that.
Thea wants to know, are the names on the suppression order ever going to come out? Yes, the Queen is dead, and so are a lot of entertainers. Yeah, are the suppression orders ever going to be lifted?
Of course they are. Of course they are. Because look, if Jacko from Upper Kumbuckta West robs the local news agent, they say Jacko was arrested today and he's facing charges tomorrow. Oh, look, he was found innocent because it was not Jacko, it was Robbo. So why are pedophiles given special treatment? Well, it ruins the reputation. Not if they're found not guilty. And why is a pedophile who was found guilty awaiting sentencing to have his name suppressed? It's almost like the Masonic filth that run the judiciary and the constabulary are protecting their own. You could be forgiven for coming to that conclusion. And maybe the polity, who are also in on this pedophile stuff, are passing laws to make sure that they are protected. So no, if you're charged with a crime, this is transparency. You're charged with a crime and found guilty, then so be it. If you're charged with a crime and found not guilty, then so be it. But it's got to be out there because the press used to, and you and I are old enough to remember this, Carl. There'd be sensational cases, and names would be named, and then whether they were guilty or not, it was then subsequently reported, and people knew. But these days, the horrifying crime is announced, and then you hear no more. Or in some cases, like anything to do with pedophilia, they're not. Now, if you remember what Senator Bill Heffernan was told, if the institution of the law was included into this investigation into pedophilia, the people would lose faith in the institution of the law. Now, that is not a reason to cover up the names. That is just an excuse. And
No,
we know,
exactly.
you know why? Because the lawyers have no integrity. You've already lost any sense of value from the average Australian punter, from the High Court, who choose to make laws rather than to adjudicate on laws, because they don't want to muck around in this nasty business about getting elected. They just want to do it from the bench. No, all that's going to change. You get charged, your name will be up there, and you can either prove yourself innocent or not. Free speech is coming to Australia in a really big way, so get used to it.
A question about Sara Gasara. We're seeing interest rate rises, prices for you're paying your mortgage back are going to go up, jobs being taken away. Interestingly, talk about as well. But right now, people are interested about Gasara and Sara. Is it real, or do they sell everything they own now and buy a decent-sized camper trailer and hit the road?
Yeah. Oh, look, I've heard a lot about Sara Gasara. I found very few people that actually explain it in detail. All your debts will be forgiven, and you'll get millions of dollars back that you are owed. And I say, well, okay, if that's true, I'm not saying it is. If that's true, if everybody's now worth millions, what's a pint of milk going to cost you? $20,000, because nobody wants to milk a cow and get 36 cents for the liter of milk they've just milked.
Yeah.
Look, there's a lot of nonsense going on out there. Step back from that specific thing, because I can't give you any more information on Sara Gasara than you can probably find on the internet. But just step back for a fraction. If there is something happening in the future, whatever happens, whether the white hats turn up at the last minute and save us all, or we have to go through many years of slow process to reclaim our sovereignty and our nation. Either way, the current financial system has to change. It has to change. And so once again, at the risk of sounding like a broken record, Australia one predicates its policies on what we can do and what we know. And what we've said is the Australian dollar will be backed by real assets of real intrinsic worth. So if you've got a dollar, a new Australian dollar, and it's worth $1 worth of gold, then you can change that for gold. It is genuinely representative of something of value, not a debt instrument like it currently is as produced. So that's the way we're going to do it. Now, will it be backed by gold? Well, we have enough gold in this country to cover all the Australian dollars that have been printed, and we understand that. But there'll be a basket of currencies, but we'll make sure that we control the production of dollar notes. We'll control that to make sure that the people do. And we don't need to borrow from anybody. There's no requirement for a sovereign government to borrow from anybody. And so we'll control our currency, and it'll be backed by real assets. So whatever, that's our plan. Now, if let's say Sara Gasara is real and it's wonderful and everybody lives happily ever after and the petrodollar is buried forever, great. If they have a system. Now, it makes sense. If the cavalry is going to turn up, it makes sense to put a safety net under there so there isn't a financial collapse, because if there's a financial collapse, then people will starve, and that's like winning the war, but everybody's dead. It's quite a Pyrrhic victory. And so it makes sense to have a safety net under the current system. So when the collapse does come, the inevitable collapse of the petrodollar does come, there's a safety net to catch everybody. See, if they didn't do that, and if they are, they're planning our rescue, and if they didn't do that, they'd be imbeciles, and they're not. So I presume that if it is real, it's a safety net to catch us. But if it's not, Australia's going to be fine because we're going to make sure we get a hold of our currency, control it, and make it a real, what they call sound money, rather than just fiat currency.
So we're just about to tick over an hour, Rick. Are you happy to keep answering a few more questions?
Oh yeah, let's go for it.
Beautiful. All right. So Evan wants to know a little bit about you and Alex Jones. Do you think you'll ever get an invite onto his show?
Yeah, give me another couple of months. I'm sitting quietly. I'm too busy. Yeah, no, we're working hard. As I said, we're working hard building this ark called Australia One, and it's got to be big enough to carry everybody. And that's the difference between some of these loudmouths, YouTube loudmouths. They've got an opinion on everything, but they couldn't organise a piss up in a brewery. It's one thing to, and that's not the same as the genuine information sharers, the news sources like Maria Z, yourself, and a few other genuine people are out there to communicate the facts, because that's critical. But a lot of these other people are just there to grab the limelight, but they haven't organised anything. Yeah, they haven't got a system by which, or a plan for the future for the rest of the country. Now, it can be a bad plan, it can be a good plan. And so what we're doing, we're building this ark. And I said, it's this huge ark, and it's got to fit a lot of people, because at the last minute, when the flood comes and the rain's coming, we're going to have to make sure it's strong enough and big enough to carry everybody from where we are to where we need to be. So when the flood does come, I mean, we look pretty silly. We're down in the valley and we're out there hammering large lumps of wood, and people are laughing at us. But when the rain comes, they'll come running on board, and that's fine. That's exactly what we expect, and that's why we're making this ark as sound as possible, in a political sense, organization, everything.
So that leads me to a question that Santa has put up. Who watches the counter of the votes? Now, that would be the scrutineer, but you've got to guarantee then that the scrutineer has better training than the AEC staff, don't you?
Absolutely, and ours did. That's why they challenged. That's why they challenged as much as we did, and the AEC staff were shocked. In fact, my wife was didn't scrutiny this time, but she did 2 previous times, I think, because and she learned a lot doing it. And she would constantly walk up and say, "Excuse me, but this is wrong. Your counter's made a mistake." And eventually, they started deferring to her because she had a better grasp of the scrutineer's handbook rules than the actual AEC staff. But on top of that, there are other policies, and this policy is a ripper. And it came from a gentleman in Canberra. I was doing a Q&A on the Hill, and he suggested a solution, and I said, "That's it. Thank you, sir. You have just contributed to A1's policy position on the electoral adjustments." And what a ballot should be, and I was saying that a ballot should be a controlled document. It should be, you can't just photocopy these things off. These are better than blank checks, and yet they are just a silly piece of green paper that can be easily photocopied and just produced by the bucket load. And he suggested there should be a carbon copy that the elector can take away with them. And I thought that's a great idea. Let's register them and have a carbon copy. You vote and you can keep your carbon copy, so you have evidence of the way you voted. And that way, if you need to, we can challenge the vote with real evidence. And so it even went to the point where if there's a counting machine that counts the actual number of the ballot but can't be associated with the name, you can in real time go online to the new AEC, put your ballot number in, and see how the machine recorded your vote. And if there's any variation between how you voted according to your carbon copy and what the machine says, that's fraud. Instantly, the result for that electorate is called into question. You see how it works? So there's a million little things that we can do that protects the voter's identity, and yet we can check in real time, and we don't have to wait for these corrupted imbeciles on TV. And God, it was irritating at the last election, watching these buffoons pass commentary on how it all went and why it went the way it went. You can get on real time, aecvotecheck.com, of aec.gov.au/votecheck 2022. Put your vote number in and you can see exactly how it's recorded. And there you go. So all these little things that can be done. And that's how you do it, because the bastards will cheat. The bastards will cheat. They always do.
Every time. The Antarctic Treaty, all governments agree on that. Well, I'm not really up with the Antarctic Treaty. I know the governments who've got a chunk of Antarctica agree on it. I don't know that they agree that they've got as much of it as they want. I don't know, Rick, during your time with the Defence Forces, did you do any training down there?
No, I wanted to, but I never realized why it was such a big deal until something piqued my interest years ago. I won't mention his name, but there was a general, and he had the Antarctic medal, which is just a white medal on his ribbon bar. And I never actually asked him because I wasn't close enough for a junior officer to ask a senior officer that sort of a question. But I did hear he once said to one of his people, the medal he was most proud of was the Antarctic medal. And that really just stuck in my head because the guy was a hero of Vietnam. He'd led men in battle. He'd done great things, and yet the Antarctic medal was the one he was most proud of. Now, ostensibly went down there, spent a few months, and came back and stood in the snow. Now, so why would a man of that eminence be so thrilled with standing in snow for 3 months? Obviously, something else is going on. Now, if you've got all the major countries agreeing to behave themselves on Antarctica, that's a massive red flag that something's going on that they're not telling us about. How about the new Australian government open up Antarctica to the Australian people and you can fly down there and check it out for yourself? How does that sound?
Yep. I reckon I could form a little group that would build a hotel somewhere down there at Mawson. We'd be right. Got a few helicopter flying mates. We'd be able to get chopper flights out. I know a few ski-doo riders, so I'm sure we can get people to the site.
You can follow Admiral Byrd's journey and see if it's true or not.
Oh, you know how to really impress me. That's going to help me. Right? When we're doing conspiracy theories, I'm going to throw this at you. What shape is the Earth? Did we go to the moon? And was Martin Bryant a patsy? I think is what Jindalee is asking here.
Oh, look, after what I've learned about what I thought was the history of the world, if you told me that the Earth was on a plate resting on the back of a turtle, I'd say, yeah, that's plausible. Because just about everything I learned in school has proven to be completely false. So once again, I have no direct evidence. So I'm just saying, you know what, anything's possible, but I'll go with what we know for the time being. But more seriously, Martin Bryant, was he a patsy? Absolutely. The circumstantial evidence, and look, the blind Freddy can see this. The circumstantial evidence is just extraordinary that something bad happened down there, and it had nothing to do with Bryant. He was just the poor schmuck that was set up. This was the excuse to disarm the Australian people. It was a bloody good excuse. People were horrified. You don't have to believe every piece of I've gone through the evidence as much as I can find online. And at first I had no opinion. With all of these things, I genuinely hold, I leave my mind open. I go, look, I have no opinion on this because I don't know the facts. So let me just examine what I can find as best as I can and make a decision on the balance of probability. But I'm always open to, new information. I'll change my position. But having said that, even if you don't believe every piece of evidence, and you can't, you look at the full parade of all the things that don't add up. There are some that I find questionable. Go, no, well, I can explain that. I can explain this, but there are certain things that are just inexplicable. And there's enough inexplicable evidence there for me to say this is a setup. Brian shouldn't. He never had anything to do with it, and it was a precursor false flag event to disarm the country. And that lovely little bespectacled man, John Howard, obliged. The good news is apparently a lot of firearms owners, they're very, very, very sloppy and thoughtless because a lot of weapons fell off the back of utes as they were driving down the road, and some fell out of boats apparently and were lost forever in the dam. It's just a tragedy. How many were just lost, Carl? It's a tragedy, I'm sure.
I heard at the same time, though, hardware stores like Bunnings and Mitre 10 were having a real supply shortage of PVC piping and end caps. So obviously people were making a lot of, floating devices so they could go out on the dams to try and find the weapons that they'd lost. Because, why else would you need PVC piping and end caps?
The good news is that'll change. The good news is that'll change, and just so people understand this, what the Americans call the Second Amendment, what we call the right to defend yourself, the right to your life, liberty, and property. It is not for hunting, and this is the point that the Americans make all the time. You don't need an assault rifle to hunt deer. It's not about hunting, folks. It's about protecting yourself against tyrannical governments. So how do we know there's evidence of tyrannical governments? Well, since Cain killed Abel, there's always been somebody that wants to be in charge, and they don't want to give it to the people. And so an armed population, And here's a number that's fascinating. Now, here's two things you can do if you think that I've got my numbers wrong. Go to Bill Whittle. Look up Bill Whittle on YouTube. He does a piece on firearms and firearms, the results of firearm ownership in the US. And it's called Number One with a Bullet. It's a video piece. It's very good. The facts are there. But let me give you the short answer. America is number 2 in the world for firearm deaths. Until you take out, I think it's half a dozen or maybe 9 US major cities that have been under Democrat control for 50, 40, 50, 60 years, and they have the highest gun control. So you take out those cities and the US drops to 138 in the world.
Wow.
So the image that you have of these gun-toting loons across the United States is a manufactured idea by the mainstream media. So if you take out those cities like Chicago, and they're all oh my God, they're just Los Angeles, controlled by the Democrats, high gun control cities. You take them out, the US is something like 138 in the world for gun deaths. You put the Democrat-controlled cities in where only the criminals have got guns, and I think the US is number 2. So that's the facts on the numbers. Now, we don't have a lot of gun deaths in this country, but I can tell you, if the elites got their way, we would, because they'd be coming after us. They'd be coming after us. And this is gun control is about disarming the population. We are about empowering the people. You have every right to protect yourself and your family. And I mean that. Some unwanted guy wanders into your house of a nighttime and is leaning over your little girl. I'm guessing he doesn't want to read her a bedtime story. Your house is your castle.
Yeah. And unfortunately, we've managed to get judges put into high positions by corrupt governments that will let these bastards get off when they're caught. Now, our colleague, a lot of people in chat are asking about the Aussie Cossack. You've drawn the line earlier this evening about the protections that a convicted pedophile can expect, particularly if they may have a profile of any sort of size. The name won't get mentioned. Your name will be suppressed. While that convicted pedophile, is out on bail awaiting sentence. Now, what the Aussie Cossack did was sacrifice himself. He walked straight up and presented himself, I believe, on a platter to the authorities. Whether or not he willingly went to do that, or he has some magnificent plan that I haven't quite seen the light of yet, whatever that case may be, he's effectively put himself out of the conversation for the next interim period, at any rate. People are saying, is Riccardo going to go and bust the Aussie Cossack out of jail? The short answer to that would have to be no, you idiot. The Cossack put himself in jail. Would you agree, Riccardo? He's not a political prisoner. They might be treating him pretty harshly with maximum security detention and isolation, but he is not a political prisoner, is he?
Not in the formal sense, but I can understand why people would say that. I think whether he was courageous or reckless, to me, is largely immaterial. I think what he's done is a good thing. He's sacrificed himself, he really has. Greater love hath no man that he give up his life for his friend. And that's what I think he's done, because he knew what he was doing. He may not have expected the result that he got, but he is not a fool. So 10 out of 10, the man is a man of courage. But having said that, we get power before his term is out. He's going to be released and exonerated and pardoned. He'll be out as soon as we get elected. He's out of jail. I can tell you that.
So a little bit of an update for people who may not be aware of it. He will be sentenced on the 30th of June. He appeared in court last Monday, and not yesterday, but a week ago, and pled guilty to, I think it was 2 charges, 2 dropped. So we'll find out the result of that. And I think that'll happen on June 30th at his sentencing. And I think people at the moment are desperate for news on him. Mrs. Cossack has gone quiet on the Telegram channel, I think under advice from the new lawyers. I think, Riccardo, you'd probably agree that what they would be trying to do at the moment is minimize his social media profile. I guess they don't want people protesting out in front of the jails, and they don't want 10,000 people turning up in front of the court screaming for political injustice. when in fact the Cossack did present himself on a platter by breaking the legislation that they'd warned him specifically not to break.
Yeah,
So
okay. Yeah, I
yeah,
get that. I really do, and that makes sense on one level, on another not. It's look,
it's
this is
not
a
right.
time.
It's not right that they've done it. I agree, but do you think when he comes out, I think we should try and get he and Darren Hinch together, because this is essentially exactly what happened to Darren Hinch. And from it came the Justice Party, which Hinch was able to gain a Senate seat out of. I think he pushed it again during the most recent election. Can you see the Aussie Cossack and Darren Hinch getting together? Both martyrs.
Oh, you've frozen there, Carl. Can you hear me at all? Can you hear me? I'm not sure if you can hear me, folks, or whether you can hear Carl, but whether they should get together or not, that's a tough call. Politics is a place where strange bedfellows can meet, but that'll be an interesting decision for the Cossack to make. But as I said, the guy's he's done Australia a service. Logic doesn't necessarily apply to politics, and I find it fascinating that a convicted pedophile is free on bail, who's more likely to be a flight risk than the Aussie Cossack, who is not free on bail at all. He's still incarcerated, and he's not even been sentenced yet. So there you go. That explains to me, at least, that what he is doing is at variance with the highest priorities of the government and the police, which is to protect pedophiles and jail anybody that wants to challenge that narrative. Let me just see if I can find the link, and we'll get back to
Oh, well, I think I'm kind of back, folks. Don't know if that's the case or not. Looks like Riccardo is back as well.
Okay, yeah, we're here.
A slight break in transmission. I do apologise to everybody, and thanks to everybody who's hung around. Thanks, Riccardo. I don't know what we were saying, but somebody stomped on us pretty hard. I've had to reboot every modem in the place just to try and get a connection back out. So
I'm
I
not
appreciate you. Thanks for hanging around.
No, I'm not surprised. I think it was we were talking about Cossack and the fact that a convicted pedophile's on bail, and the man that named him
Yeah.
is still incarcerated. So that just highlights in stark contrast of what the priorities for the polity, the constabulary, and the judiciary are: to protect the pedophile and attack those that attack pedophiles. Pretty clear. Excuse me.
Scott Miles, to get your take on the Royal Commission into veteran suicide, a very serious Royal Commission that we needed to have. Do you think that its terms of reference were wide enough?
Oh, I don't think they have any intention of finding out what happened. They've been neglecting veterans. In fact, they've put, I think we may have mentioned this before, but so forgive me for reiterating it. The veterans of Timor we used as crash test dummies for drugs, and a number of them suffered psychotic episodes, and their lives were completely destroyed by the drugs that they were given. And basically, the commanding officer of the 1st Battalion, John Caligari at the time, ended up a Major General, Lieutenant General, I think. He told these guys either get the injection or you don't go on operations. And being soldiers, of course, they give their eye teeth to go on ops, and so they went. And then they handily just ignored the veterans that were literally poisoned with the consent of the government and the senior military officers, all of whom will pay for their decision. They were subsequently ignored by the military, and they were subsequently ignored by the medical profession, who said they were suffering from post-traumatic stress disorder, which is complete lies. These poor soldiers, to a man, were poisoned and their lives destroyed. So they don't care. They don't want to find an answer. They never will. The second part, and I know they're talking about the suicides that come out of Afghanistan, excuse me, which need to be investigated. But there are also suicides as a result of sexual abuse and rape in the armed services, particularly in the Navy. So this is a nasty, nasty secret, which I can guarantee you no politician and no general, admiral, or air marshal wants to investigate, but we will, and we're going to hold everybody to account. And if half the Navy resigns, then I don't care. We'll tie the ships alongside. We'll get replacement crews and away they go. But there's some nasty stuff that's going to come out. Not out of this Royal Commission, I can promise you that, because an old adage in Canberra, you never have a Royal Commission you don't really know the answer to. It's a sop.
Yeah, that's true.
It's a lie. And watch this space. A lot of generals, admirals, and air marshals and politicians will spend the rest of their lives in jail for what they have done. And that's why our role is to get one of our policies to get the Department of Veterans Affairs back under the Department of Defense. And so those bastards that run the joint can actually have to deal with the consequences of their neglect. There's so much wrong going on in the Defence Force that a lot of the younger blokes don't know about, and the older blokes do know about, but they won't say a thing about it. But it will come to light, but not under this government or any subsequent government other than ours. We're the only ones that genuinely want to find out what's going on and hold the guilty to account.
I think I heard a statistic this morning that Penny Wong has already travelled to more South Pacific nations in 2 weeks than the former foreign minister did in 3 years. Is that having much of an effect at your end of the world?
Oh, well, I've heard stories, and they're not true, of course, and I'd hate to be, there's no evidence of this, but apparently she's a Chinese Communist Party spy, and she's the next Prime Minister of Australia after Albanese's done his initial sort of walkthrough. Then he'll resign for family and health reasons, and Penny Wong will take over. So of course she's travelling around to see the impact of the CCP's investment in the Western Pacific. But that's just a story. It might not be true.
Richard Miles must feel a little worried, do you think?
Aggrieved? Yeah, well, he's been boosting the CCP. He's aggrieved. Poor Richard Miles. He's been boosting the CCP Oh, like nobody's business. My God, he's the one, as I said before, just to remind your viewers that may not have heard it. He was saying not long ago that we should have closer defense ties with the Chinese military. That's like saying you want closer defense ties with Adolf Hitler in 1938. I mean, he's been right up there boosting China forever. And so is he going to be aggrieved? Oh, I don't know. I think he probably knows that he's just a number two kind of guy. He's that pat him on the head, do what he's told kind of guy, and let Penny take the lead and lead us to the new country called New China, which is, I understand, what kids in China are taught about Australia. It's called New China.
Well, it's where all the new riches are coming from. People want to know more about your tax policy. Glenn is just one of a number of people who asked a question. If you could, maybe explain it a little more, or explain it again, because I think the last time we chatted, you gave a very good explanation of it. It's based on a 2%, a 2% number on new purchases only, isn't it?
No. It's non-cash transactions. I haven't got the numbers in front of me, but think about it. Just about every tax you can think of was gone. Income tax, payroll tax, GST, FBT, stamp duty, you name it, they're all gone. And people say, well, how can you pay for it? Well, because right now the tax burden is carried by the PAYG people, your wage slaves that work on a fortnightly.
Oh, now we seem to have lost Rick. Frozen up a bit.
Salary. Hello, here we go. They don't like tax either. Oh, dear me.
No, by the sounds of it. Back again, no.
Okay, so I haven't got my paperwork in front of me, unfortunately, so I can't give you the exact numbers, but roughly speaking, this is how it goes. Total government state expenditure 2018 was in the vicinity of 750, this is rough numbers, $750 billion. Tax receipts were a little over $500 billion. So there's already a $250 to $230 billion deficit every year, because what they take from us, wage slaves, is that 750. Now, that 750 also includes, you pay somewhere between 30 to 40% in your income tax, but then you're paying a whole lot more. Your total tax bill that you are paying every year is probably closer to 60 to 70% tax when you factor in all the other hidden taxes. That's why it's so hard to get ahead. It's by design. To create wealth, not earn a salary, that's different. To create wealth, you need three things. You need leadership, you need labor, and you need capital. Now, leadership comes in the form of the entrepreneurs. That's fine. Not everyone's built to be an entrepreneur, but there are some people that just love turning nothing into something. Labor, there's plenty of people out there ready to do a good day's work for a good day's pay. So how can the government constrain the Australian economy and minimise the individual Australian's ability to create wealth? You constrain capital. How do you do that? You tax them to the hilt so they can't get ahead. So that's what they've done. So we have these tax receipts, which total around 750 billion a year. Not receipts, expenditure. That's federal and state expenditure, 750. Receipts a little over 500. So I think it's about 522 billion a year. Now, non-cash transactions every business day, and don't hold me to these numbers, as close as I can remember, it's about $520 billion a day exchanges hands. $520 billion a day. Now, there are 251 business days last year, so you multiply that daily amount by 251 and take 2% of that. So what you're doing is you're taking 2% off every non-cash transfer. That'll give you $1.3 trillion. So now you're $500 billion in the black. The previous number was somewhere around the 750. You're now at 1.3. So you're now half a trillion dollars in the black. So what's happened is we have shifted the tax burden from the PAYG individual, the poor tax slaves, and we've put it across the entire economy, because, as you know, corporations, companies, trusts minimize their tax as much as they can. Well, you don't have to do that anymore, because you're only going to pay 2 cents in the dollar. So everybody actually wins, believe it or not. Everybody actually wins. But what this will reveal is how much has been stolen from you, the PAYG taxpayer, forever, and how much the corporations are be getting away with. Now, the pollies love to say corporations aren't paying their fair share, but they're never going to do anything about it. It's not in their interest, because they're owned by the corporations. In fact, pollies should have sponsors on their suits so we know who owns them. I think it was Famous American comedian said that once. But here's the point, the money's there. The money's there. And that's how we
Yeah.
do it. We spread it across the entire economy, not just the PAYG earners. Everybody's going to come home with more money. And now the reason why that's important is very simple. The metrics that politicians use to talk about the economy goes like this. The GDP numbers are fantastic. Our balance of payments brilliant. But that doesn't mean anything to Jacko and Laurel, who are still breaking their back trying to save up a deposit for a house. They're working 2.5 jobs each, and the kids have to go off to childcare a month after birth because they need to do that. But that's all by design as well. So that's going to change. See, our metric is this. It's got to be good for kids and good for family. That's the first metric. And so we want an economy that is so strong, but strong in the sense that one breadwinner from a family will earn enough to get married, have kids, educate the kids, buy a house, go on a few holidays, and leave a nest egg when they pass. Now, that's not too much to ask. The average Australian goals and dreams and aspirations are quite modest. They don't want to rule the world like the elitist scum that do. We just want to live our lives the way we choose to live it. And that's what you're going to do. Your one wage earner, your one breadwinner will make enough to do all of that. And then that leaves one parent at home, which is what a family needs, whether it's mum or dad, that's your business. We don't care, none of our business. But you should be able to make enough money to raise a family, whether you're a mum or a dad. And you do that,
Yep.
and there's one at home to raise the kids, because that's what's best for kids, to have mum there, not some institution-trained imbecile that wants to teach them how to masturbate as opposed to do their times tables, which is what we've currently got.
Yeah.
So there you go. So it's not just tax, it's got to affect, you pull one policy thread, it's got to touch everything positively from our perspective.
Absolutely. You've shown us the book twice. Bring it up again. Give us another plug for the book. But
Okay.
A is for Apple to know whether or not you'll be releasing it as an audio book, or is it released as an audio book?
Yeah, not yet. Again, a million things to do. The publisher's on me to do that. We want to get an audio book out. We're going to do some promotions for it as well.
I know a bloke who had a microphone you could use for that.
Say again?
I know a bloke who had a microphone you could use for that, for recording that, just saying.
Yeah, so it's going to be an audio book, but right now there's a million things I've got to do, and that's going to take time, which right now, unfortunately, I don't have. It's in its third print, so it's in its third print, which has pleased the publisher no end. Wilkinson Publishing out of Victoria. So go to Wilkinson Publishing, get your copy there. And look, just do it just to make up whether you like me or not. You can read and go, this guy's a busted flush, or this guy's a hero, or something in between. Save yourself the angst. Is this guy the real deal or not? Read the bloody book. It'll cost you $30. You spend more on that on a night on the piss at the pub, and you can use it as firewood.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I don't think there'll be too many people using it for firewood, but hey, look, you never know. Normies, we're having this discussion earlier this evening with Darren too. When the normies do start to wake up, there's going to be a lot of angst, a lot of worry, and a lot of concern, and then there's going to be a lot of them passing on, or at least they're going to be more wide awake to the fact that people are passing on around them. They seem to be very dismissive of it at the moment. There are so many sports stars, actors, famous people who've shuffled off this mortal coil just this year alone, and yet the penny still isn't dropping for people. What's the name when it happens?
Well, yeah, it's the media is the key to this, because what's the latest story? Sudden adult death syndrome. People just carking it, and they're making up lie after lie after lie. And the buffoons in the media, the corrupted shills, the prostitutes are perpetuating the lie. What'll happen is this, in answer to your question, a lot of the normies are just good people who believe what they've been told. See, the default setting for a human is to trust. The amygdala is where that decision is made. And when a baby's born, the amygdala's default setting is to trust. It's got to trust its parents. And through life, we learn to distrust. That's the whole process of growing up. You get betrayed. And eventually you learn to discern between the real deal and something else. Or if you can't, then at least you're not surprised when you get betrayed. And we've all been on both sides of the betrayal deal to varying degrees. And so we've had this very, very gentle life in Australia. We've been protected by design from most of the ills of the world, and now it's hitting us. Now what's going to happen is some normies just won't. They will just refuse to accept it. They can't believe it, only because it is too psychologically damaging to accept that what they have predicated their entire life on has been a lie. It'll be too tough for them. That's why the change management industry and consulting is so strong. Getting from one place to another is a tough gig. Now, there are ways to do it, and we'll apply that to the nation. We really will. There's a whole process you go through to minimize, to shorten the time, and to make shallower the depth of collapse. And that's a skill. There's nothing secret about it. That's what the change management industry, as I said, is all about, and we'll have to apply that. But a couple of things need mentioning. Firstly, not everybody that had the jab is going to die. There's no death sentence here. A lot will. There's no doubt about it. There's some will die. And you'll hear some inflated numbers and some, everybody that's had a jab will be dead in 3 years. Not true. Because there are things that you can do, even quite apart from the stories of med beds and intergalactic cures and the rest of it. There are things that you can do immediately to let the body do what it does, and that's heal itself. And that is, do your research. You'll find it out online. If you give yourself the right doses of micronutrients and vitamins and minerals, it gives the body the opportunity to repair itself, and it can repair most of the problems. Fasting is a massive benefit to health. Controlled, proper fasting, not starving yourself, and you can do it stupidly. But once again, look, do as much research as you can on fasting. Do as much research as you can on micronutrients and vitamins and minerals. And you'll find out the body can actually heal itself of things that are allegedly incurable. Absolutely incurable. There's documented cases of people who have cured themselves of diabetes through fasting, and then they go back to a normal diet, and the diabetes doesn't repair it. It never returns. So there's a lot out there that you've not been told. So that's the first point. Your health is in your hands. There's a lot you can do to make sure you can recover. Some will die. But the point of people accepting that they have been betrayed at the most egregious level, that most of what they learned at school was a lie, that most of what they've been told by their doctors, by their priests, by their rabbis, by their politicians, it's all lies. That'll be too much for some. And we might, pick a number. I don't know, 20% will just refuse to accept it. They'll just refuse. And others will get angry, but we'll get through it. And this is the maturation process of Australia as a political people. We have to grow up. We've never fought for our land on our soil, except a brief incursion up at Darwin by the Japanese in World War II. But the average punter, their most challenging thing is making sure they get a cappuccino with a light dusting and cinnamon at the cafe. Life is harder, and the one blessing that I've had with my career is I've lived and worked in some really awful places and seen some really awful things. So that's why I'm so grateful of Australia. That's why I love this country. This country's given me everything. I mean, my parents might have come from somewhere else. They came from Italy, and I love my Italian heritage. But, this is my country. It gave me everything. And I have, to quote General Sir John Monash, I've incurred a debt to this country, which I am obliged to repay. And that's the basis of it. You've got to realize that this is our home. This is everything to us.
Well, thank you again for your service. It's put in more than most have in the country. So thank you very much again. Petra wanted to know, when will the arrests start happening and be made public? It's hard to be categorical about such things. You've said that you believe that there have been certain arrests already, and I certainly believe that too. The date of them being made public, I suppose, is problematic, really, because it all has to be timed globally, doesn't it?
Yeah, it does. Look, if I had to pluck a figure, and don't hold me to it, if I had to pluck one, I'd say by the end of the year, stuff will start to come out. And it'll has to come out slowly, because once again, there's no point terrifying people into suicides.
Yeah, exactly right.
Look, it grinds my gears, because every day we delay, there are more kids being killed, and it really, really, really aggravates me. But the fact is, we've got 25 million people in Oz that have to gently be woken up. But not gently in the sense that it'll take years, just months. They start to see, as I said, the orange hats, Peter Crednell there, and say, oh gosh, look, this former prime minister's been arrested for child sex trafficking and satanic ritual abuse. And they have to hear someone like Peter Credlin say it and see the face of this former prime minister up there, and they will believe it, and they'll be shocked, but we'll help them through the process.
Yeah. And I've saved the best question till last, I thought, at any rate. So this comes from old Really. Would Scott Morrison qualify as an Australia One candidate?
Oh, well, okay, let's think about it. We can employ him as a hump in the road in the car park. I mean, that'd be a good job for him. But other than that, not really.
There might be some way. There might be somewhere in the back office, mate. They might have a room for him. It might have a gimp box in it, the mask, but that'll be a whole other story. Riccardo, thank you. You've said you'd spend an hour with me on a Tuesday night. So far, you've spent nearly an hour and 3/4. I really thank you. The questions were thick and fast tonight. We'll do it all again next Tuesday night. Have you got anything for us to keep an eye out for in the next week? Riccardo's tip of the week before we get more truth.
No, look, the only thing we can do is start now, folks. Get into your local community, find ways to help, join an organisation, whatever you can do. Start strengthening those bonds between neighbours. I know it's tough because neighbours don't know each other anymore, but get in there, get involved somehow, and get ready to get through this tough period. Stock up, make yourself as self-reliant as possible, so you're in a position to help those that won't have stocked up. I promise you, there'll be a knock on the door, and somebody, because you won't want to go to the shops, even if there's stuff there, and there'll be a knock on the door. There'll be a neighbour with the 2 kids, and they haven't eaten in a couple of days, and so make sure that you can help your neighbours out. So, what you can do locally will have a national impact.
Yeah, it's going to get serious over the next 6 to 8 weeks, folks. So I would say follow Riccardo's advice, stock up, and not that we're in the business of giving financial advice, and certainly not qualified to do so. But there is an awful lot of advice being thrown around at the moment about where you can invest your money. All I'll say is be very careful about whoever is giving you that advice and whatever it is that they're telling you. I wouldn't go, spending my money too much on anything at the moment. And not that I have any money to spend anywhere. That's not my problem. That's not my Riccardo and I share the same tin of beans. It's just, mine's a bit colder. He eats the warm half and then sends the rest to me. Thanks, Rick. Really appreciate the time. My best to you and Rhiannon for the week ahead and the girls, and please stay safe. As I like to say, there are plenty of dickheads on the road. Let's not be one of them, shall we?
Thanks, Carl. Always a pleasure, and we'll see you next week.
Look forward to it, mate. See you again.